Therefore, the delegates with plenary powers of the people of Texas in solemn convention assembled, appealing to a candid world for the necessities of our condition, do hereby resolve and declare that our political connection with the Mexican nation has forever ended, and that the people of Texas do now constitute a free, sovereign, and independent republic, and are fully invested with all the rights and attributes which properly belong to independent nations. And conscious of the rectitude of our intentions, we fearlessly and confidently submit this issue to the decision to the supreme arbiter of the destinies of nations. 190 years of Texas, my friends. God bless us. So I want to tell you a little bit about what happens to Texas after this Declaration of Independence. What was going on March 2nd, 1836? Anybody know? There's something important happening. The Alamo, exactly right. How many days are left of the Alamo? 4 days left. Yeah. Were things going well? No. Yeah, sorry. You can tell I have small kids because I'm like Socratic. And was that a good thing at the Alamo that happened? Yeah. So the Alamo is 4 days away from falling, and things are at a low ebb. You know, one of the interesting things about the Texas Revolution, it stretches across 2 calendar years. It goes from October 1835 all the way through April 1836. And in 1835, Texas wins every battle. In 1836, we lose every battle, except for the last one. And the last one is the one that counts. And one of the lessons of the Texas Revolution, I think, is the necessity of persevering, even through terrible odds. And the odds were terrible. We have to understand that. And we have to understand the situation in which independence was declared. Because independence was not declared because Texas was riding on a crest of success. Quite the opposite. Santa Anna enters Texas with his army, divides it into 2, and he's got one that goes off that eventually hits Toledo and Goliad. With all the atrocities that occurred there, he himself leads his army up to Bexar, to San Antonio, and slaughters the Alamo garrison after 13 glorious days. But you know, when all this is happening, the convention at Washington on the Brazos is gathering, and there is, I just want to emphasize, there is no real prospect of success for Texas at all. And everybody knows this. Everybody knows that likely what's going to happen to Texas is the same thing that happened to the Gutierrez-McGee expedition in 1813, which is every last man is going to be killed, every settlement's going to be wiped out, and the people who are taken prisoner will be treated as pirates and summarily executed. That's what's going to happen to Texas. And every bit of common sense and self-preservation says they got to go. They got to either reach an accommodation with the dictator, which is probably not going to happen at this point, or they need to flee for the Sabine River as quickly as they possibly can. And what do they do instead? They declare independence. There's a lesson for us in that. I mean, first of all, the lesson is be a Texan, right? Because you know, that matters a great deal. But the other lesson is that even though every odd was against them, hope was not gone. You know, hope. You know, one of the things that I love about the state of South Carolina, which contributed more than its share of Alamo defenders, by the way, is the state motto: "Dum spiro spero." While I breathe, I hope. And there's always a chance. There's always a chance. And Texas took that chance and actually ended up prevailing, partly because of the arrogance of the dictator, but also because of the qualities of the Texans that led them to continue on in fighting. And this Declaration of Independence comes almost as an act of defiance. We know we're on the back foot. We know we're on the ropes. We know we're losing. And we know that Texas may have an independent existence of days, if not weeks, because of the power that the dictator is bringing to bear. And yet, we declare independence. We know that we are outnumbered literally 10 to 1, and yet we declare independence. We know that every farm, every town, every settlement is going to be burned, and every person caught by the dictator is going to be killed, and yet we declare independence. And when you read the Declaration of Independence, I think you see the source of that spirit. It's a rare Declaration of Independence. Even the U.S. Declaration of Independence does not talk about reference to first principles, but the Texas Declaration of Independence does. And it's because they see themselves living in this tradition. I've talked several times, you know, with several of you and in other places, that the Texas Revolution is essentially a continuation of the American Revolution, and that's true. It is. It's fought for the same reasons. It even begins in the same way. The American Revolution, of course, begins when the British tried to seize the armories at Lexington and Concord. The Texas Revolution kicks off when the Mexicans tried to reclaim the cannon that they had lent to the town of Gonzales. So for you Second Amendment fans, there's a nice parallel in there. You should be allowed to keep arms, and you should fight those who try to take them from you. Now, this is what the Texans believed. But I want to pull the camera back even more and remind you that the Texans didn't just see themselves as living in an American drama, and not even just an Anglo-American drama. They saw themselves living in a tradition of liberty that extends all the way back to antiquity, which is where these ideas of liberty and nationhood and state and rights, are fundamentally grounded. What does it say on the Gonzales flag? Come and take it. What's that a reference to? Sparta. Yeah, that's exactly right. The Spartans at Thermopylae. Molinabe. Come and take it. Come and take it. And so the Texans themselves see themselves as being within that tradition. It's not mere mimicry for them. It's not play acting, because there's real skin in the game. Like there is death or glory at stake for them. And so they believe. Just imagine, you can conceive of this in one of two ways. You can think of the incredible arrogance of these frontiersmen in a town like Gonzales, which is a nothing town on a nothing frontier, standing up and saying, we stand in the tradition of the Spartans at Thermopylae. I mean, go out on the street now on Congress Avenue and try that and see how much purchase you get. But they believed it. So you can conceive of it as arrogance. You can also conceive of it as a proper understanding of the pride that accrues to any free man and woman in our societies. And that is how they understood themselves. So too at the Alamo was there an understanding that just as there was the challenge to come and take it at Gonzales, that at the Alamo, the death of the garrison there mirrors what happens at Thermopylae. And in fact, if you go up to the Texas State Capitol, just 2 blocks north of here, you will see at the Alamo Monument the line that Thermopylae had her messengers and the Alamo had none, right? Because there's nobody there to bring the news of the sacrifice of the men. It's only Susanna Dickinson and her child and a slave named Joe who are allowed to leave. And the intent that Santa Anna had in allowing these three, well, the baby said nothing, by the way, but the intent in allowing those two to leave with Susanna Dickinson's child was to spread terror. Send the news of what I have done. Send the news that I killed every last man. And Susanna Dickinson had a truly terrifying tale to tell. She watched her husband bayoneted to death inside the Alamo Chapel, one of the last men to die. He went and kissed her goodbye and ran to the other side of the chapel and died. He knew that was happening. He had that happen to him. And so she goes and she tells this story. They point her in the direction of Sam Houston's army, and he's gathering his forces at this point. And she goes and she tells the tale, and the tale spreads like wildfire. And the intent that the dictator had in doing this was to spread terror, was to terrorize him. Know that this was me. Know that this is who I am. I'm coming for you. I have more men than you. I have more determination than you, and I will kill you all. So leave or die. And you know what happens? The army grows. Every man who can comes during the runaway scrape as they're being chased from river to settlement. And Sam Houston's army and the entire Texas nation stays one step ahead the whole time. This takes place across 50 days. And if they are caught, it is the end, not metaphorically, but literally for them. And every time Santa Anna's army comes upon an empty settlement, they burn it. Every time they come upon an empty home, they burn it. Every time they come upon livestock that's been left behind, they slaughter it, leave it to rot. It's an act of contempt, because for them, Texas is ending. It's over. They're putting a period at the end of this story. And the Texas nation flees. But every man left joins Sam Houston's army. The women and children go ahead, and the army, the function of this army as it accretes and grows, is first to protect them as they are fleeing to the Savin River, to the safety of the neutral strip and the United States. But we get to a point about modern Columbia, Texas, where the armies rest. And in the Valley Forge of Texas, it's not a well-known episode, there's a few days where Houston is able to bring the men together and weld them into something like an army. And then they flee for another few days, and then they get to San Jacinto. What's the difference at San Jacinto? How are the Mexicans caught unawares? Does anybody remember? No sentries. Why is there no sentries? That's correct. They're confident. They think it's a mopping up operation at this point, right? No sentries. What's Santa Anna doing? He's in his tent with Emily Morgan West, the Yellow Rose of Texas, who's got a statue at the Alamo, by the way. Unsung heroine of Texas. And she is distracting the dictator. And so when the Texans erupt upon the camp, how long does the battle actually last? Does anyone remember? 18 minutes. That's exactly right. It lasts 18 minutes, and it is a total destruction of the Mexican army. And what's interesting is the battle cry of the Texans in both English and Spanish Just remember the Alamo. And in Spanish, Juan Seguin's men are yelling, Recuerden el Alamo, as they bayonet the Mexicans in the swamp, which was well-deserved and well-earned at that point, by the way. That's how we win. That's how we win. We, our forefathers who fought for this, you know, and whether you're from Texas originally or not, whether you have roots deep in, I've got roots that's deep in Texas, but they're all on the Mexican side. So, but good thing we lost. The you know, whether you have this though, it's incredibly important to remember that there was nothing about Texas independence that was at all the sure thing. There was nothing about Texas independence that should have happened the way that it did. And you can ascribe to it the hand of Providence, as I think, you know, many properly ought to do. I do. But even if one does not, you can ascribe it to really the hearts and the spirit of men and women who came to a frontier and decided to create civilization, who saw something worth fighting for, who saw something worth defending and preserving. These are all people from other places that were already settled, that were safe, where there was no war. They could have gone back to Tennessee. They could have gone back to Virginia, back to England. There was a guy from Denmark at the Alamo. He could have gone back to Greenland. Like there's all sorts of different places they could have been, but they chose to be there. They chose to be there because there was something that is constitutive of the self in going to a frontier and creating order, creating civilization. And I would say that impetus, that spirit, is something that is fundamental to being human. Each of us partake of it. Any one of us who has ever formed a family is part of that spirit, the questing for something new. Any one of us who has gone someplace, a place where we weren't before, a place where our parents never took us and tried to build a life, have partaken a little bit of that spirit. And even if we don't have a physical frontier with us now, although we do have the Mexicans invading now, so there's that. But that's what's old is new. But at the same time, even if we don't face the dangers of the Texas Revolution, even if we don't have that kind of violence that you know, predates upon us and gives meaning, really it does, it gives meaning to our efforts, we nevertheless embrace that meaning with the way in which we comport ourselves in the lives that we live. And that's just tremendously important. We remember these things not because they are irrelevant to us in good stories, but because they are deeply relevant to us. We have a charge to act as if we're Texan, and that's the heritage that we have. Let me tell you a little bit about what happens after the Texas Revolution. I know the food is coming any second, so in a sense, I'm killing time until that food shows up. But I also want to talk to you about this. The fight was not over at San Jacinto. The fight was not over at the treaties of Velasco, which conceded Texas independence, which, by the way, the Mexicans immediately rejected. And they rejected it on the grounds that Santa Anna was a prisoner, and he could not possibly have agreed to the treaties. But in one of these unique twists of kind of Mexican civics, everybody obeyed him anyway, and they retreated. And so the Republic is established. Now, the Republic had no borders. This is 1836. We finally get a state capital in 1838. And we get a Lone Star flag in 1839. That's when it becomes official. So does anybody know who developed the Lone Star flag? This is a bit of Texas trivia for you. It's a woman named Joanna Troutman. She's from Georgia. Never set foot in Texas while she lived. But she designed the Lone Star flag initially for a company of Georgian volunteers who came to help fight for Texas independence. And many years after her death, she died in Georgia, was buried there. The state of Texas actually disinterred her and moved her to the Texas State Cemetery, which is, oh, I know, right? Welcome to Texas. Yeah. Like we'll come get you if you do something. Yeah. So Joanna Troutman is here, even though, much to her surprise, she is buried in the Texas State Cemetery. But I mean, what greater honor? Like you're dead, and suddenly you realize you're the designer of the Lone Star flag. So God bless. She is the Betsy Ross of Texas. So we get the Lone Star flag in 1839. Here's what happens though at the end of the 1830s, because at the end of the 1830s, things start to fall apart for the Republic of Texas. Texas had grand ambitions territorially, grand ambitions civically. And by the end of the 1830s, it started to become clear, and it became very clear through the 1840s, that Texas was never going to be able to meet and fulfill those ambitions. In 1838, the Comanche War starts. Now, the Comanche War, in a sense, never really ends, but a new Comanche War erupts. And by the way, does anybody know where the Comanche stronghold was in Texas? It's the Balcones Escarpment, which is like 2 miles that way. The Texas Capitol is here because it is the edge of the Balcones Escarpment. And so the idea was to attract settlement and also attract state defense here to a frontier area, specifically because that Balcones Escarpment, which is literally Steiner Ranch, guys. I mean, this is not far off. Like you can drive to the Canyonlands in 20 minutes from downtown. was one of the most dangerous and violent places in the entire North American continent. And I do not exaggerate on that. Up in Leander, where my family and I live, there's nothing else good about Leander except the fact that I live there. But there is, if you go to one of the, you're in Leander, I'm sorry. Jefferson's there too. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. Well, they got dinosaur tracks. They got Jefferson Dreckler, and if you go to one of the cemeteries off 2243, there is a mass grave of an entire pioneer party that was slaughtered in modern Leander, Texas, in the early 1840s. And the reason they were all killed was that they reached evening and they decided not to push on to Austin, against the advice of everybody riding with them, and the Comanches came and killed them all to the last man. That's how violent this area actually was. And so when the Comanche War starts, I want to be clear. There's only been two episodes in American history in which Indian tribes have almost wiped out Anglo settlement. One was with King Philip's War in early Massachusetts, and that's 17th century. Okay, so we're talking the 1650s. King Philip's War comes, within a hair of disestablishing the Plymouth and Massachusetts colonies. 200 years later, the Comanche War, the Great Comanche War in Texas against the Texas Republic, almost does the same thing. The largest single Indian raid in all of American history, and I'm talking 400 years, took place in Texas, and it was the Great Comanche Raid of 1840, which was so powerful and so violent that it actually erupted from the Balcones Escarpment, burned several towns away, and reached the coast. The coast at what the time was a town called Linville, which was the Republic's second largest port. It's now a very small and insignificant town, but it's on Matagorda Bay. They reached the town of Linville, and the townspeople take to boats and they float in the bay while the Comanche burn their entire town to the ground. That's how bad it was. Just imagine the insecurity. All Texas is a frontier. There is no safe place in Texas during the Republic era. And so there's a realization that Texas must constantly be at war. Now, in 1841, Sam Houston is able to make some peace with the Comanches, and we immediately transition to the Mirabeau Lamar era, in which we have renewed war with the Mexicans. How many of you knew that the Mexicans invaded Texas again after the Revolution? Some few of you did. Now you all know. All right, and this is important. They didn't invade just once, twice. There were two different Mexican invasions, one of which captured the Alamo and San Antonio in 1842. And they weren't able to stay because they didn't have sufficient manpower to extend their rule over the rest of Texas. But the Mexicans came, they captured San Antonio, and there was obviously a Mexican project that was designed to eventually effectuate the reconquest of Texas. Texas tried to respond with the invasion of Mier, which failed, with the two invasions of Santa Fe, New Mexico, which failed. New Mexico is properly ours, by the way. We'll get it someday. And what ends up happening, okay, yeah, good, yeah, because look what they've done with it, right? Yeah, exactly. And then the final thing, no, I'm going to leave Colorado to its own devices, but the final thing to be aware of is that Texas, as a republic, it's engulfed in war. It's unable to develop, but it displays great intrepidity. In 1843, there is a Texas Navy, and the Texas Navy is disestablished. It's a small flotilla, 3 or 4 ships. The Texas Navy is disestablished. So you know what the Texas Navy does when they hear that the Congress of the Republic of Texas has disestablished them, denied them funds, and is going to break up their ships for scrap? Well, of course, they take to sea for one last battle, right? Illegally, they seize their own vessels. This is a true story. They seize their own vessels, sail out of Galveston, sail out, and they sail down to the Yucatan to find a Mexican fleet to sink. And they do. And the fleet that they come across is not just any Mexican fleet. It is a Mexican fleet manned by Royal Navy veterans. It is Mexican in name only, so it is the British that they fight, and the Texans only have sail-powered wooden ships, and the Mexican flotilla with Royal Navy veterans has copper-hulled, steam-powered ships. So who do you think is going to win this one? Well, it's the Texans, obviously. The only incident, the naval battle of Campeche, 1843, the only time in naval history, in the history of mankind, that wooden-powered sailing ships, through superior seamanship, defeat and sink a steam-powered, metal-hulled opponent. Only time. Only Texas would do that. And then they sail back victorious, having achieved their aims, dock and submit themselves to arrest for piracy because they have hijacked their own navy. And they are arrested, and then they're freed by crowds the next day. Ain't that a Texas story? And this is why, though, knowing that Texas could not endure forever, because in the words of the IRA terrorists, Texas had to be lucky every time. Mexico only had to be lucky once. And so there was a clock ticking, and that is why we had the great tragedy of joining the United States. But that's a story for another time.